One time for the realest who show us love, even though he could kill us. We are full of evil, even in cathedral buildings. Wicked people like a CEO on bended knee to our feelings. Who supersede the conceit of a villain who blew and breathed in the same air. Hustlers who said they ain't care. How can we dare not reserve fear for God alone? Erect our own image and with it camouflage his throne.
Right. Variety of calibers here. What's right for you? Depends. So here we have 22, 380, 9 millimeter, 40 Smith & Wesson, 10 millimeter, 45 ACP, 223, 308. There's pros and cons to all these different calibers, and I'll take a few minutes here to go through the pros and cons and go from there. So with the 22, you're talking about something that has very little recoil, so it's easy to manage. It's perfect for beginner shooters to get them just used to, the gun going bang and, without a lot of, the gun jumping around. So it's perfect for that. Also, 22 ammo is very cheap. So you can go out and just plink all day if you would like to with the 22s. The cons on the 22, obviously, is going to have very little stopping power, very low velocity. So it's not a lot of use cases for the 22, with the exception of small game like squirrels, coons, rabbits, things of that nature. So if you got some small game to get after, there you go. Even small, birds and whatnot. There you go. Or beginner shooters. Love breaking them in with a 22. So moving on to the 380. The 380 is great because you're going to have a lot more stopping power than a 22, obviously. You also are going to have a round that's very easily concealable. A lot of concealed carry people choose the 380, especially smaller frame people, male or female, because it's most 380s are compact pistols. And so that makes them easier to conceal, whether on the person or in a vehicle. That's the pros. But the cons is you're talking about something that it's not going to have a lot of stopping power, okay? Easily concealable, not a lot of stopping power. So yes, you've stepped up a tier from the 22, but at the same time, it all depends on your threat. All depends on what your threat is behind, and so on and so forth. So now moving on to the 9 millimeter. Some of the obvious pros of the 9 millimeter is it's going to have a lot more stopping power than the 380 and the 22. Also, in my opinion, it's the perfect size, it's the perfect balance, rather, between recoil management or recoil manageability and stopping power. So it's going to be a little more difficult to handle the recoil of a 9 millimeter than these other two, but you're going to have more stopping power. So that's a decision that you have to make. Also, a good thing about the 9 millimeter is it's widely available in a variety of different bullet weights. So also it's easily accessible. You can find 9 millimeter everywhere. As opposed to, say, 10 millimeter. You're not going to be able to find it just everywhere. A lot of law enforcement use it. Now moving on to the 40 Smith & Wesson. 40 Smith & Wesson it's a great cartridge. It's not as widely available as, say, the 9 millimeter or even the 10 millimeter. But at the same time, you're talking about a cartridge that's going to give you a lot more stopping power than a 9 millimeter when you move up to this 40 Smith & Wesson. And that was part of the reason why the feds had adopted for a while the 40 Smith & Wesson over the 9 millimeter, because some of the situations they found themselves in, the 9 millimeter just couldn't handle, what they were up against. So they moved over to the 40 Smith & Wesson, only to eventually go back to the 9 millimeter. For some of the reasons I'll delve into. For example, number one, you're going to be able to carry many more rounds of a 9 millimeter than you can of a 40 Smith & Wesson because of the size of the bullet. Also, the magazines. All magazines is not going to be double stacked when you start moving up to these larger calibers. Um, and also the weight of the magazine and gun itself. You're talking about a much larger pistol, frame wise, than these here. When you start talking about carrying a pistol that will shoot this. So, but those are pros and cons. More stopping power, harder to recoil, manage the recoil. Also, you get the job done in some cases where these can't and won't. Moving on now to the 10 millimeter. So the 10 millimeter is the perfect balance between the 45 ACP and the 40 Smith & Wesson. The 10 millimeter and the 40 Smith & Wesson, they are diameter wise of the casing, they're almost identical. And I often shoot my 40 Smith & Wesson through my 10 millimeter firearm. Casing, diameter wise, is almost the same. Height wise, the casing and the bullet weight is different. I'm not telling you to do that, shoot a 40 Smith & Wesson through a 10 millimeter pistol. I'm just saying it can be done. Just like you can shoot a 38 special cartridge through a 357 firearm. So interchangeable in that sense, okay? When you're talking about carrying a 10 millimeter, because the casing is taller, you're talking about getting more velocity behind this here bullet, which equates to more stopping power. So more stopping power is good, especially if you're in a situation where you're in the woods and you get approached by a bear that has his heart set on making you his dinner. A 10 millimeter is going to make that bear have second thoughts, if not have his last thoughts. So it has great stopping power. The cons, obviously, is it's harder to control the recoil when shooting a 10 millimeter. You're talking about a large pistol. But you're talking about a caliber also that'll get the job done. You can find some double stack magazines of the 10 millimeter, but when you're talking about a double stack magazine and a pistol that will shoot this cartridge, you're talking about some weight. And when you're talking about trying to carry that as a concealed carry weapon, you're talking about having a small cannon on your side. But it can be done. I've done it. I like the 10 millimeter. It's a fun cartridge to shoot. It's an interesting cartridge. Now moving on to the 45. Some YouTubers say if God carried a gun, he carried a 45. This they call God's caliber. I love the 45. Just as much as I love the 9 millimeter. I love the 45 because you're talking about maximum stopping power with the pistol. To some, you give up a lot of recoil management, with some people. But I'm telling you, if you get a quality 1911, for example, like a Nighthawk Customs Trooper, and it's chambered at 45 ACP, and you shoot that pistol with this caliber cartridge, you're talking about a fun, fast, accurate pistol. So don't think that just because the recoil is a lot crazier than some of these smaller calibers that you're going to automatically lose all of your accuracy. That's not true. I love shooting the 45. I love carrying the 45. A lot of people will argue, why would you carry a 45 when you can only carry, 8 to 10 rounds in a magazine, as opposed to with a 9 millimeter where you can carry, anywhere from 10 to 20, bullets in a magazine. Well, when you get more accurate and more experience and are able to control the recoil better, you don't need a whole lot of rounds to get the job done, especially if you only are addressing a single threat. Now, if I was addressing multiple threats, I definitely would want to have a firearm chambered at 9mm with a magazine that could hold a lot more rounds. But if you're talking about an ordinary self-defense situation, I don't mind at all carrying the 45, using the 45. It's going to get the job done in some cases where the 9mm just can't get the job done. You know, you can shoot through some things with this that this just ain't going to go through. And also vice versa, because you're talking about a heavier bullet that's traveling slower than this smaller bullet. So this is going to travel faster. This is going to hit harder. So you got to decide. Depends on the situation. Now moving on to rifle cartridges. Here we have the 223. You're talking about a very, very versatile cartridge. It's very popular in competitive shooting. It's very popular in self-defense situations, and it has adequate stopping power. So, and you'll be able to also use it in hunting situations on small game. So there's a lot of use cases with the 223 or even the 5.56. There's not a lot of cons besides the fact that carrying a magazine full of these is going to be a lot heavier and harder than carrying a magazine full of these. So also a con would be these are going to be a lot more expensive than these. But it depends on the situation. There you go. 223. I love it. Close quarter combat situations, moderate mid-range combat situations, it'll get the job done. Last but not least, the 308 Winchester. Even though there are cartridges much larger than the 308 Winchester, in my opinion, the 308 is the most versatile cartridge. It's the one where if I had to choose one rifle cartridge, it would be the 308 because it's widely available. It's a very versatile cartridge, meaning you can use it in self-defense situations. You can use it to stop small, mid, and some large game in hunting situations. And you'll be able to reach out and touch something, targets at up to 800 yards very accurately. After 800, you're talking about diminishing returns between velocity and accuracy as opposed to distance, So even though 308 can travel a lot further than 800 yards, you're going to start losing a lot of velocity and accuracy after 800 yards. And keep in mind, 800 yards, 800, 850, that's roughly a half a mile. So if you can hit targets accurately and effectively and stop threats at a half a mile away with this cartridge, I think you're doing pretty good. So any more than that, obviously you're going to need a larger cartridge, but it's not going to be a lot of situations where you need to hit targets beyond a half a mile. Okay. I love the 308 because if you get a very nice precision rifle, the recoil is very manageable. It's not going to heat up that precision rifle like it would a rifle on the cheaper end. The cons is it has a lot of kick as opposed to some of these other rifle and pistol cartridges. A whole lot of kick. And also a con is it's very expensive. So you're talking about a 22 for 5 cents as opposed to a 308 on the low end at 80 cents. I would say on average $1 per round. 5 cents, $1. So if I just wanted to go fool around or doing some training or with beginners, you want to use these. These you really can't do a lot of training with these when you're actually going to be utilizing these in that particular situation. So you have to train with what you're going to be using, but it gets expensive training with these. That's all I'm saying. But still, I love it. I love going out to Aurora Sportsman's Club to their 600-yard range and just knocking out targets from 100 all the way out to 600, and just staying sharp, at those types of distances. Um, so you have a wide range of cartridges here, and what's right for you is going to depend on you. It's going to depend on your situation. It's going to depend on what's on the other side of you. Also, as a caveat, I'll add this: it's going to depend on the range of your threat or your target. In my opinion, pistol cartridges are going to be used and are most useful in situations of 50 yards and in. Okay. Can they travel a lot further than 50 yards? Of course. I like plinking steel with the 9 millimeter out at 100 yards, and it'll go much further than that, but again, you'll be talking about running into diminishing returns. You're going to lose velocity, you're going to lose accuracy, after 50 yards or 100 yards. Let me start there. You're going to lose accuracy, you're going to lose velocity, and so losing effectiveness. So most use case for pistol cartridges is 50 yards and in. The 223, most use cases for this cartridge is going to be from 50 yards to 300 yards. Now we're talking about self-defense or combat situations. Can the 223 go a lot further than 300 yards? Of course, by far. Can you use it in close quarter combat situations or self-defense situations? Of course you can. But I'm just saying, why utilize this in close quarter combat situations when you can utilize these here? A lot easier to handle, a lot cheaper, a lot easier to maneuver with these here. So it can be used, but generally speaking, its use case is going to be between 50 and 300 yards. Now, the 308 is going to pick up where the 223 left off. You're talking anywhere from 300 out to 800 yards. Practical, effective, accurate use range. Can the 308 even be utilized in close combat situations where these here are mostly used? Yes, it can. Yes, it definitely can. Is it practical? Well, it depends. Depends on what you're up against. But I'm just speaking generally, and I'm talking about the range where these here different calibers are most effective, and it's most likely to be utilized. There you have it. So you tell me, what do you think is right for you? What's your experience? What's your opinion? If I had to choose one cartridge out of all of these, man, it's a tough one. But if I could only go with one, it would be the 9mm. Versatile, effective, easily to control. It's the best all around round. Pistol wise. Rifle, if I had to choose between the 223 and the 308, obviously choosing the 308. The 223 is going to be more ideal for close quarter combat situations where this can be utilized as well. But this cartridge is going to stop threats that this one just cannot. Even if your threat is in a vehicle, if you're utilizing this cartridge properly, you'll be able to stop that vehicle. Or stop that person in that vehicle with no problem. So there you have it. You tell me what's right for you. What would be your pick? Peace.